if you are suffering from even low-grade symptoms of depression or worse, think about what your diet is. And if you are eating a lot of comfort foods, and you might think, well, I'm eating those comfort foods because I'm depressed. I just don't give a shit anymore. Like I don't care about my life. I don't care about my health. I don't care about my weight. What's the point? It doesn't matter. Like these other things are why I'm depressed. Even if that's happening, I would say, depression can take on a life of its own. And even though one thing can start it, if you start kind of getting trapped in this vicious cycle of overeating junk food and then not sleeping well, that is, again, causing all sorts of changes in your body and brain. It's causing inflammation, gut microbiome changes, neurotransmitter changes, hormone changes, all sorts of things that then keep you depressed, or they make your depression even worse. And sometimes part of the solution, not the entire solution, but part of the solution can be, I'm going to stop eating the junk food. I'm going to do some kind of a quote unquote healthier diet.
Peak Human.
Les humains à leur meilleur.
Seu apogeo.
Peak 人間
Peak Human? O melhor humano?
Peak Ganhariot.
Hey, welcome back to the Peak Human Podcast. I'm Brian Sanders. This is the last one for the season. I'm going to take a little break for Christmas and New Year's. I'm back home in Hawaii working on the Food Lies film, my director and editor. We're doing an intensive work session in person. Things are going very well. This film's going to be so good. Slow and steady wins the race. Got a lot of great stuff to put in this film. Great graphics, explainer visualizations. Man, we're going the extra mile here. So I'll be home in Hawaii working on the film. You can check out the Sapien podcast while Peak Human takes a break. Download that on any podcast app. Also, check out the Food Lies YouTube channel. I'll be posting some things there. Check out nosetotale.org where we got all the great meat. We're shipping to all 48 states. We got our awesome products back in stock. We got the primal ground beef with all the organs mixed in, all regenerative. Best way to get your organs. We have the low PUFA fed pork and chicken. Now the bacon is really guilt-free because it's got that low PUFA diet. All regenerative, pasture-raised, the whole deal. Nosetotale.org, get yourself a box. Body care products, we got the skin food back in stock. We got the soap, the biltong. We have the livervores. It's kind of like a Slim Jim, but exactly the opposite. Regenerative beef, no chemicals, no weird stuff, no sugar, just liver and beef and fat. Man, it's good. Eat it on the go. Also got some seasonings, and vinegar is the only thing that cures it. So no weird curing agents. Get that at nosetotale.org. Give this podcast a review. Share it with friends and family. Start back at episode 1. All right, today's guest is Dr. Chris Palmer. He is so interesting. I love what he's doing. He is a Harvard Medical School physician. He's a researcher, consultant, and educator dedicated to improving the lives of people suffering from mental illness. He is working at the interface of metabolism, metabolic disorders, and what we call mental disorders. Although most people don't think these are related, there's a tremendous amount of scientific evidence linking these. He is doing very awesome work to show how your diet, your lifestyle, your metabolic condition affects your mental health. We talk about everything from schizophrenia and bipolar, very serious conditions that people think there's no way a diet can treat. Yet it does. It does. When no medications can work. He has some amazing case stories you'll hear about where he's put these conditions, or other physicians have put these conditions in complete remission. Really magical stuff. But then there's also more. There's great stories of treating depression with diet, improving people's mood, getting off medications, even curing alcoholism with diet. It's so cool. We're talking more of the ketogenic type diets. These are great. I was a big fan of more high-fat, low-carb diets for quite a while. I started adding carbs back in, as I've been talking about for over a year now. That's been going really well, and we talk about that as well, how everyone doesn't have to do keto. It's just very powerful to, quote, fix your metabolism, get over to fat adaptation, and then maybe you can introduce some of the good whole food carbs, fruit, honey, maybe some sweet potatoes back into your diet. So we discussed this all. Very interesting stuff. He has his own story of healing as well. Enjoy this one with Dr. Chris Palmer. All right, we're live with Dr. Chris Palmer. How's it going? Where are you calling in from?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. And I am in Boston, Massachusetts.
Great. And we were just talking about if you remembered me from the Metabolic Health Summit, we kind of crossed paths, but I missed your presentation. What was it on? Do you remember? It was 2 years ago.
It was on the ketogenic diet in psychiatry.
Awesome. That's what we're talking about today. Well, more broadly, diet and lifestyle and mental disorders and mental everything.
Mental health, yes.
Mental health, which is great. This is so interesting because not many people understand this. Maybe people listening kind of get it, that diet and lifestyle are so huge. But in the mainstream, people think it's crazy to recommend diet and lifestyle for mental things. So give people an overview of that concept.
It's a huge issue, this issue of kind of people not believing it. Because for the most part, especially the mental disorders that I'm talking about, I treat people with serious, chronic, debilitating, supposedly lifelong disorders like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, treatment-resistant depression. I have people who've tried dozens of medications, who've tried shock therapy, who've been in and out of hospitals. And I am talking about dietary interventions for those people that everybody thinks they have a serious brain disorder, like there's something really wrong with their brain. That's not normal. That's not just feeling a little sluggish or brain fogged from eating too many carbs. That's like a real disorder. And most people in the world, certainly most people in the mental health field, think there's no way in hell diet is going to do anything for that.
Yes, but you are a big part of changing that perception. I was looking at your webpage. You have a lot of studies published about this. We can link to those later and maybe we'll go over some of those. But I saw that you tweeted about a study on alcoholism and using a ketogenic diet. And I think that's a great place to start. You suggested we start there because it's kind of like a wake up call to everyone because it's so kind of crazy, it sounds.
It is. I think it is a great place to start. So the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism did a study, a 3-week inpatient study of chronic alcoholics. They admitted them all to a hospital unit. They detoxed them, and they basically randomly assigned people to either a standard American diet or the ketogenic diet to see if it could make a difference. And lo and behold, the people who got the ketogenic diet needed less detox medicine. They had fewer alcohol withdrawal symptoms. They had fewer cravings for alcohol. And their brain scans showed decreased inflammation in their brains. And they also showed changes in brain metabolism, which the researchers were specifically looking for. So on the surface, most people are confused as hell by that. A diet for alcohol, these are hardcore alcoholics, people who can't stop drinking, who are poisoning their livers, who are poisoning their brains, ruining their relationships, ruining their lives. They cannot stop drinking. And a lot of people are confused as hell, but it turns out, there's kind of a long science story that goes along with this that dates back over 10 years. But serious hardcore addiction researchers figured out that there are problems with brain metabolism in people who are chronically alcoholic. And they decided to see if the ketogenic diet could restore brain metabolism and be helpful. And lo and behold, it is.
That's so interesting. And before you go on, I'll tell you over the years of me doing social media, many people have reached out to me and told me this. Just, accidentally. They're like, I accidentally stopped drinking. I have no craving for alcohol anymore. All this type of stuff. I'm telling you, without any prompt, they just tell me this. And it also made me think of Alzheimer's a bit. My mom actually, well, she's still alive technically, unresponsive for the past 2 years in stage 7 Alzheimer's. That's where the brain can't utilize energy, basically. And it sounds like a little bit the same as which came first, someone became an alcoholic or some of these things are interesting to think about, like how it happened, where that their brain couldn't use energy, and that maybe the ketogenic diet to get them ketones to their brain helped their brain get energy and helped with their symptoms.
That is precisely how it's working. So with both Alzheimer's disease and with alcoholism, studies have shown that their brains can't get enough energy specifically from glucose. That glucose, for whatever reason, their brain has trouble using glucose as an energy source. And there are lots of ways that might happen. Insulin resistance is one of those ways, but there are actually a lot of other ways that might be happening. But what the researchers are clearly measuring is that people with both of those disorders, on average, tend to have brain regions that are energy deprived. And so researchers in both camps, in the addiction field and in the Alzheimer's disease field, are studying ketogenic diets and ketones in order to see if ketones can be used as an energy source, given that glucose seems to not be efficiently used as an energy source. And preliminary studies in both fields are showing positive kind of results.
Yeah, and with the alcoholism, do you think it's more than just the ketones? Like, do you think there's something going on with the gut microbiome? As I think that's what people were suggesting when they talked to me. Maybe they went carnivore, they went very low carb, and they kind of changed their gut where they didn't crave those basically bacteria that want to eat glucose or carbs or something. And so maybe that had something to do with not wanting the alcohol anymore, or maybe beer, right? Beer is a lot of that yeast and fermentable carb stuff.
That is a great question that leads to this to a much bigger issue of, like, why do these things work? Like, why would a ketogenic diet work for something like alcoholism? Why would it work for epilepsy? Why would it work for Alzheimer's disease? And it really does start to get very complicated. The gut microbiome is a definite possibility. And on the alcoholism front, probably the strongest connection that I can think of off the top of my head is I would pull from the epilepsy literature. So, the ketogenic diet, for any listeners who don't know this, ketogenic diet is an evidence-based treatment for epilepsy. It stops seizures even when medications and surgery don't. It's been used for 100 years. This, 1921 is when it first started getting used. So we're at 100-year anniversary. And there are some research studies showing that possibly one of the primary mechanisms of its, ability to stop seizures is through the gut microbiome, and that these changes in the gut microbiome actually increase the activity of a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It, medications like Valium and Klonopin increase the activity of GABA. Alcohol also increases the activity of that neurotransmitter. And so there's reason to believe that maybe the ketogenic diet is changing the gut microbiome. Those changes result in higher kind of GABA activity in the brain, which has a calming, anti-anxiety, anti kind of craving effect on the brain, and that can be helpful to people with alcoholism and seizures.
That's interesting. I kind of threw in that which came first, the alcoholism or yeah. What I meant kind of was that maybe the alcohol soothes them in a way that they don't need to be soothed anymore with the change in diet. Does that make sense?
It does. So you're getting at a even kind of a bigger question in the addiction field, which
Yeah.
is what causes alcoholism. And there are two big, huge camps. So one camp is people start drinking and they get addicted to it, and that's the cause of alcoholism. Kind of like what causes obesity. People start eating delicious food, they get addicted to it, and they don't stop. So there's definitely a camp like that in the addiction field as well. People start drinking alcohol, they really like it, and they don't stop. and that's what causes addiction. And what's the solution to that? They just need to stop. But there's a whole other field in the addiction field, or a whole other camp that says, no, people are self-medicating. And what does that mean? It means that some people kind of report that before they ever had their first drink, they were anxious, depressed, something. There was something wrong with them. They did not feel normal. They didn't feel good. The very first time they had a drink, everything seemed so much better. Wow, they were normal for the first time. They could talk to people without panic attack symptoms. They could relax. Everything was good. And that's why people get hooked, is that they're trying to medicate a problem that in their brain. And I think there's truth to both sides, to both versions. I think it can go either way.
Yeah, I think it's never one thing. I'm always we're talking about camps. I'm always in camp, no camp. That's kind of my joke that, well, now I'm in a camp, but I'm trying to be in no camp. So, because it always seems to be multiple things. We can never just say it's one thing. And also, okay, before we move on, in case people didn't listen to my intro to you, can you tell people who you are and what you do?
So my name's Chris Palmer. I'm a psychiatrist. I work at McLean Hospital and Harvard Medical School. My regular day job is actually I'm the director of continuing education. So I run educational conferences for mental health professionals. And my hobby over the last 15 years, but in particular over the last 6-7 years, is ketogenic diet and its effects on psychiatric patients, mental health patients.
That's great. And I understand that your school, the Harvard Psychiatry School, is basically the number one psychiatry school out there.
Yeah, it depends on who you listen to and what rankings you follow and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Harvard Medical School is usually ranked the number one medical school in the country and probably in the world. And for psychiatry, we have a sister institution called Mass General Hospital. And although we're sister institutions and we actually train the same people and some people work at both places, we're actually like competing siblings as well. So we compete with them sometimes. So we actually get ranked separately, McLean Hospital and Mass General Hospital. And so we kind of, compete with each other for who's going to be number one.
Well, my point is you're up there. You guys are up there doing big things. I do have a question about Harvard, the School of Public Health, the Chan, whatever, School of Public Health. Why are they so confused about diet? Why is it always plant-based stuff over there?
So the one thing I'm going to say in defense of the Harvard School of Public Health is that we do have a guy named David Ludwig at Harvard Medical School, and
one of the good ones.
He is a very big low carb ketogenic diet proponent. Has been doing some of the pioneering research showing how it works, why it's effective, why it should be taken seriously. He has his own model of obesity, the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. So the thing I want to say is Harvard is a huge place. It is a huge institution with thousands and thousands of researchers. And the reality is Harvard is pretty good about giving researchers freedom of academic pursuit and academic kind of speech. And we absolutely have some hardcore people here who are anti-ketogenic diets, anti-low carb diets, pro plant-based diets. But we also have a lot of people here who are in the low carb and ketogenic communities, even some in the carnivore communities. We've got people in all sorts of camps, and so it's not always fair to kind of say Harvard's like this evil institution that don't blame all of Harvard on one expert's kind of narrow viewpoint.
I'll try not to, but the School of Public Health in general is very annoying. But you
don't
are
like
part
them.
of that. And I've had Dr. Georgia Eid on, who is a Harvard psychiatry. I don't know what you call her, but she's one of the good ones as well. And so people can go back and listen to that episode. And she's doing great things talking about mental health and diet and all that type of stuff. But maybe you could tell us your quick backstory about how you even got into, researching keto and diet and lifestyle with mental health.
So the quick version of the story is that, like so many people in this space, it begins with my own personal story, which was, I didn't use it for mental health per se. I used it for my physical health. When I was in my late 20s, I was not really, even by definition, overweight, and certainly not obese. I had never been obese in my entire life. And but I had a gut. I was like a skinny person with a bit of a
Skinny
gut.
fat. I was skinny fat. Yeah, in my 20s, looking back, I was like, oh wait, I was skinny fat.
Yep, skinny fat. That was me. And so but I was actually pretty disciplined. I was doing like the super low fat diet because that's what we were supposed to do. I was exercising at least 3 times a week, trying my best to take care of my health. And unfortunately, that led me to metabolic syndrome. I had prediabetes, I had high blood pressure, I had bad lipid profile with really elevated triglycerides, very low HDL. Um, I won't even go into LDL, but those are
Can of
all
worms. Yeah.
factual. I just want to say for the low carb community, those are all bad things. Having really high triglycerides, not good. Having really low HDL, not good. Having high blood pressure, not good. Um, and 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 my doctor, year after year was just like, "What are you doing?" What, I'm like, "Diet and exercise," and I'm doing a low fat diet. And he just kept pushing like the same thing. Keep doing it. Do it more. Do lower fat diet. Exercise more. And eventually, enough years went by that he was just like, you know what, you're gonna have to go on medicine. And he asks me, do my parents have diabetes? Yeah, both of them do. Are my parents overweight? Yeah, both of them are. Do my parents have high blood pressure? Yeah, both of them do. Well, you're screwed. You need to go on meds. And I told him, you know what? Not yet. I'm gonna try one last ditch thing, and I'll get back to you. And like 6 months later or something. And so I ended up doing the Atkins diet. The Atkins diet was really popular at that time. And I went ahead and tried the Atkins diet because I'd heard through the rumor mill that might be helpful for people with diabetes and for people with metabolic syndrome. Although I really didn't believe it at the time I tried it. But it was kind of like, well, I'm going to have to go on meds. I may as well try this last ditch thing. And lo and behold, within 3 months, everything got dramatically better. My blood pressure plummeted. Everything else got better. I went into my doctor, told him, he's like, keep doing whatever you're doing. Um, and I've never looked back. I've never had high blood pressure since. That was 25 years ago. I've never had high blood pressure since. Never had bad lipid profile since. None of that. So it has worked extraordinarily well for me. One of the things that I noticed in doing that was not only did I improve the physical health markers that I was interested in improving, but I noticed that, wow, I'm sleeping so much better. When I wake up, I feel good. I don't feel hungover. I don't have to push the snooze alarm as many times. Like I can actually get out of bed and feel decent. And during the day, I just noticed that I had a lot more energy, had a lot more motivation. I felt really great. And I had never really felt that great in my entire life. I had never been a high energy person. And so I started to kind of get curious about like what is this? Like why would I be feeling this way, and why would a change in my diet do this? But more importantly, I'm seeing patients every day that have treatment resistant depression, and they're trying medication after medication. They're trying psychotherapy. Some of them are trying shock therapy. None of it's working. So I start thinking and wondering, like, gosh, I wonder if they tried this diet, if it could do even a little bit of what it's doing for me, that if it could do that for them, that would be huge. Like that would be a really big deal for them because they're running out of options. We don't have more medicines to offer them. We don't have other treatments to offer them. And so it was getting to a point where I could easily offer this quote unquote alternative treatment to them because they had run out of options. They really had. And so I started offering it to them. And lo and behold, a few of the patients that I worked with were able to do the diet. Not everybody was. I'll say that up front. But a few of the patients that I worked with were able to do the diet. And lo and behold, it had profound impacts on their chronic mood disorders. And that really started at least some of the work I was doing. At that time, the Atkins diet was highly controversial still. We didn't have a lot of the research that we have today. I was really afraid that I might even lose my license or something for, prescribing the Atkins diet to somebody for depression. So I didn't really talk about it. I didn't tell people about it. I certainly wasn't publishing anything. And then that all changed about 6 years ago now when I helped a patient of mine with chronic, it's called schizoaffective disorder. It's kind of a cross between schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And he was miserable, had hallucinations and delusions every day of his life, was absolutely miserable, also obese. And he wanted to help losing weight. So I was like, well, let's try this. Let's try the ketogenic diet for your weight loss thing, because he had tried some other things. It didn't work. And I really was only helping him to lose weight. I had no anticipation that it would do anything for his mental symptoms. Because at that point in time, in my mind, like schizophrenia is totally different than depression. Like they have nothing to do with each other. There's no way in hell a diet would help schizophrenia. And so he's on the ketogenic diet. Within 2 weeks, I notice a profound antidepressant effect in him. He's making better eye contact. He's lighting up. He's smiling. He's talking more. I'm like, wow, this is doing something for you. I see that. But that wasn't shocking to me because I had seen this antidepressant effect in other people. And then about 6 to 8 weeks into the diet for him is when he started saying, those voices that I hear every day, they're going away. Those paranoid, thoughts that I've been telling you about for years. I'm like, oh yeah, I know about those. He's like, I don't think those things are true anymore. I think those things are, I don't know why I thought that. It sounds kind of crazy now that I think about it. And
Wow.
I don't think those things are true.
So, man, so it's basically many years of him being completely not being able to function in society, really trying all the meds, becoming obese, maybe from some of the meds, and then that kind of unraveled just almost on accident with the dietary change.
Yes. And for me, that was the game changer for me. And that was the point at which I kind of felt like, okay, this is a huge deal. This is not, helping somebody feel less depressed. That doesn't seem like that miraculous. Depression can get better in lots of people. So for whatever reason, it didn't feel miraculous to me. This felt miraculous. This was dumbfounding to me as a psychiatrist. And I actually had to check in with other people. Like I had to check in with this patient's father. I had to check in with another psychologist who was also treating this patient to be like, are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? Like, I'm kind of not believing. I'm having a hard time believing what I'm seeing, but are you seeing this? And they're all like, yeah, no, we're seeing it too. Like, what the hell's happening? Like this, what is this diet doing? But because it's doing something. And we didn't think he could ever get this much better.
This story's so great. It actually, I saw it was covered by NPR. NPR interviewed you about this.
They did, actually. So, and it aired all over the country, which was very cool.
Wow. So this is not a one-off, too. I mean, to people listening who don't know about this stuff, it might seem like crazy, or people are just like, "Oh, well, that it's probably coincidence because this is too crazy." I understand you have another amazing case study that you documented as well with a woman who was older.
So I can tell you about her. So I actually have several case studies, and since that time, I have heard from people around the world on their own experiences. So first and foremost, I'm not the only person doing this treatment or seeing the results. Several other patients, many patients have actually done this treatment on their own. They just tried to lose weight using a low carb or ketogenic diet just to lose some weight. And they noticed that their long-standing psychiatric symptoms were going away. And but probably the most remarkable case is the one that you kind of alluded to, which is so that, and this was not my direct patient. This is a patient of Dr. Eric Westman's. It's probably familiar to a lot of your
He's in the
audience.
film. Yep.
And he, so this was a patient who was 70 years old at the time that she started the diet. She had been diagnosed with chronic paranoid schizophrenia when she was 17 years old. So for 53 years, she had schizophrenia. And she was a classic case of schizophrenia. There was no ambiguity about her diagnosis. She had hallucinations every single day, throughout the day. She was paranoid. She was disorganized. She could not live independently. She had a court-appointed guardian. She had people coming into her home to help her take care of bills and grocery shopping and stuff like that. She was also obese, and she was chronically miserable. She tried to kill herself several times in the 2 years prior to starting the diet. So in every way, she was a classic treatment-resistant case of schizophrenia. And for those of you who don't know, once you've had that diagnosis for 53 years and the hallucinations, the next stop is death. People don't go into full remission from that diagnosis and that history. That is not reported anywhere in the literature other than this case that I'm telling you about. And so she went, at the urging of her primary care doc, she went to Eric Westman's weight loss clinic, and they were using the ketogenic diet. And lo and behold, she was able to do it. And within 2 weeks, she reported that her hallucinations were going away. Within 6 months, she was off of all of her psychiatric medications, and all of her symptoms were completely gone. And so the good news is that was over 13 years ago now. So this woman is now in her 80s. We have long-term follow-up of what happens to her. She has stayed off of all her psychiatric medications. She has remained in full remission from her schizophrenia. She lost 150 pounds and has kept it off. She got rid of the guardian that the court had appointed. She learned how to take care of herself and learned how to do her own thing, and is happy to be alive, has not been suicidal, has not attempted suicide in the last 13 years. And as I said, that is impossible. That does not happen in regular psychiatry. But something about the ketogenic diet made it possible for her.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And she's sticking with it, right? She's hardcore about it.
She actually is not hardcore anymore. So she is lazy keto now, and will sometimes go off the diet during the holidays. and remains in full remission. Still gets back to a low carb way of eating, but is not 100% in remission. There's another patient, similar story. She was younger. She's now in her late 30s. She had schizophrenia for 20 years. She too, similar story. Tried the ketogenic diet, has had a full remission now for over 5 years of her symptoms. And she too can sometimes veer off the diet. She talks very clearly, though, that when she does go off the diet, if she goes way off the diet, she starts to notice depressive symptoms coming back, other symptoms coming back. And so she kind of gets herself back on the diet to remain well.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I kind of find the same. We kind of talked about this before we started recording. Even if we're talking about personal stories and our personal diets, we're not like anti-carb per se, right? It's not like we have never eaten carbs again. I've been talking about this for the past couple of years. I've been adding whole food carbs back in my diet, but because I'm metabolically flexible, because I've fixed my metabolism basically, and cleaned up my diet, and done a whole bunch of things, and now I can eat carbs. And we talked about David Lugwood, where he has a whole carbohydrate insulin model. So I wasn't saying I'm endorsing the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity and stuff. It seems to be not quite right after all. But basically, we're saying that you can go low carb, go keto, at least it'd be an option, right? We're saying, hey, why is this not even an option? It's so demonized. It's just this big taboo thing in mainstream culture. And that you can go on it for a while. And I'm a big fan of doing it for a number of years, or how long you can do it until you get better, and then you can add carbs back in. It's not like carbs are poison. It's just might be bad for some people in certain times. And then now we add carbs back in and are feeling okay. And it sounds like this lady can do that to a little extent. Maybe she's not doing it perfectly, or she shouldn't because of her condition.
Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, I think you're raising a really important issue, which is at the end of the day, everybody's different. And we all have different histories. We all have different genetics. We all have, I think more importantly, different epigenetics that we inherit from our parents. And we've all had different experiences, and your body remembers. Your body will remember what you've been through. So if you have been obese, your body's going to remember that. If you have been schizophrenic, your body's going to remember that. And if you just let everything else go, if you just go back to 100% of all of the things that you were doing at the time that you had those conditions, there's a good chance your body's going to go back to those conditions. Your body remembers it. And for the people who've already been there, so for people who've already been obese, it's going to be a lot faster for them to get back to obesity if they fall completely off the wagon and go back to their old diet. I think for people with mental disorders, similar deal. If you have had schizophrenia, you're at high risk of going right back into that if you don't continue to take care of yourself. But taking care of yourself doesn't mean doing the strict diet or other plan that you needed to do in order to get better. Sometimes you can do like a low carb or ketogenic diet that gets you dramatically better, improves your metabolism. I'll just use that, exactly what that means. Gets really complicated fast.
Yeah.
But improve your metabolism so that you are more metabolically resilient or metabolically flexible. And then you can add back in certain foods that most people, I think, would still consider healthy foods. You're not adding in Danish and donuts and tons of cookies and things like that. You're adding in probably more paleo type carbohydrates, whole food carbohydrates, and for some people that works out great. And actually, it can even be better because they can put on more muscle. They may notice they have more energy. they can actually feel better on that subsequent diet than they did on the ketogenic diet that got them into a healthy range.
Yes, this is so good. This is what I love talking about, and I'm glad people are waking up to it. Even guys, we talked about Saladino, you were on his show. He's gone on the same journey, right? And he was being like, "Oh man, carnivore, you got to be hardcore carnivore." And now he's adding in the fruit and the honey and feeling better and telling his story. And yeah, I mean, this makes sense. You want to be able to eat these foods. The problem is so many people can't because of the modern diet and lifestyle, or you're eating the really bad versions of foods. I get why people demonize carbs because there's so many bad carbs out there, right? And it's like if there's such a difference between, yeah, you said the cakes and the cookies and the donuts than just eating like a sweet potato or a piece of fruit. It's like very different. And also, there's different ways to manage and eat the carbs correctly, right? You can work out. Like I eat carbs. I'm not eating them all day, every day, right? I have them once a day, or it's after a workout, or it's the right whole food carbs, or you go for a walk afterwards, right? There's all these methods that people can use, or just getting out all the seed oils. Some people get really into, how the seed oils and the really high ratios of omega-6 can screw up your body and metabolism and cells. And once you get those out, then you can come back and then these carbs are perfectly healthy and safe. So yeah, there's so much context there.
There is. And I think it gets complicated fast because when you're talking about metabolism, it's an extraordinarily complicated thing. But like you brought up the gut microbiome earlier, that's a really easy example. Is we know that the gut microbiome changes with different diets, and that it may be that some people with a specific gut microbiome can't tolerate certain foods, but if they go on a special diet, their gut microbiome over time can evolve and change, and so that they can maybe start to tolerate different foods. But, there was one study that came out just a few months ago, just to put a plug in for why would the carnivore diet make sense for some people even. And it was really interesting because what the study found was that for different people, fiber, which is primarily in plant-based foods, fiber for most people is beneficial. It results in short chain fatty acids, which actually serve as a fuel source for your colon cells. It does a lot of other things that have all been linked with metabolic health. However, they did find a subgroup of people who actually had significantly higher levels of inflammation when they ate fiber. And it's because they had a very different gut microbiome. And so for some people, I think if your gut microbiome cannot tolerate fiber or actually has an adverse reaction to fiber, it can actually make you metabolically worse in the short run. And I think the way I'm thinking about it is that means there's a subgroup of people for whom the carnivore diet might actually be a good option, at least if nothing else, in the short run, to allow kind of their gut to heal itself, to reformulate itself, and then maybe someday those people could start to introduce more plant-based foods and tolerate them okay. We really don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know. And unfortunately, I agree with you. Far too many experts stick with very dogmatic, rigid formulas for what is a healthy diet and what is a non-healthy diet. And far too often they all stick with this one size fits all. There's a one size fits all diet for every human being on the planet. Everybody should be eating the following foods, and
Yeah.
as long as they don't eat these other foods, every human being will be healthy on that diet. And that is just really asinine if you think about it.
I think so. I've always been about the framework, that there's a healthy framework of eating, and that there's no one specific diet. You choose based on, your personal even preferences, right? And in this framework that is a pretty broad framework. And back to the carnivore and healing the gut and then adding back foods in. I know many people who've done this successfully. I mean, I was just with 2 people this Sunday who have done this successfully, had major problems. They did carnivore. That's all they could do. They couldn't tolerate other foods. Then they slowly started adding in some foods back in. They got some sauerkraut in there. Maybe that was helping with the probiotic stuff. And now they're able to eat all kinds of stuff and they're feeling amazing and it's great. So I want to go back to the when other people go off the diet or those people in the case studies that you mentioned go off the diet, how their symptoms come back. It's kind of just showing how powerful the intervention is and that was the intervention that was working. And it's not just some coincidence, right?
Yeah. So one of the case series that I presented, that I published, it showed exactly that it was 2 patients with schizoaffective disorder who were both dramatically improved on a ketogenic diet. Both of them had multiple episodes over about a 2 to 3 year period. Both of them had multiple episodes of non-compliance with the diet. And that either means that they purposefully went off the diet. They saw, in one case, it was a woman. She was at home with her parents. They had all sorts of bread and pastries and cookies and everything else around the holidays. And she didn't normally live with them, so she didn't normally have that food in her face. When she went home to stay with parents for a week, she saw all that food and she couldn't resist and she went ahead and ate it. She knew perfectly well what she was doing. And she got dramatically worse, actually needing hospitalization in that case. She actually got so bad that she needed to be hospitalized. But there were other instances with both patients where they thought that what they were eating was allowed. So in one instance, I'll just put this out as a cautionary tale, not to, bash sugar alcohols, because some people do fine with sugar alcohols. But at least one of my patients did not do fine with sugar alcohols at all. So he ate a keto chocolate bar. That was the label on the bar. Keto chocolate bar filled with sugar alcohols. And within 24 hours, he was having a horrible, overwhelming hallucinations, delusions, actually came in saying, I think I need to be hospitalized. I can't take it. You have to do something. This diet is not working anymore. And I checked his ketones. They were non-existent. I had him get on the scale. He weighed 5 pounds more than he had weighed last time I weighed him, like less than a week ago. So I said, you clearly went off the diet. Like, what the hell happened? What have you done? And he is red in the face, yelling at me. No, I have not stopped the diet. I am still doing the effing diet. Like, you cannot say that to me. I'm like, no, you're not on the diet. You don't have any ketones and you've gained weight. These numbers aren't lying. Like, something has gone wrong. And we argue back and forth. And I say, look, I'm not blaming you. I'm not trying to accuse you of anything, but you are not on the diet. What have you eaten? Like, walk me through step by step, hour by hour. What the hell are you eating? Because there's something that is not on the diet. And then he's like, oh, well, I did buy a chocolate bar, but it's a keto chocolate bar. It says keto right on it. I should be allowed to eat that. I'm like, no, you're not allowed to. No, you're not allowed to eat that anymore. Sorry. That's not going to work. And, it's interesting because the Atkins diet, the Atkins company had all of these bars back in the day that were equally toxic for people. They would be losing weight on the Atkins diet, and then they would like buy these delicious chocolate bars that were supposedly Atkins friendly, and they would start gaining all the weight back. And then they would also find that they started having more cravings for carbohydrates and other crap food, and then they'd fall off the wagon. And so this is not an isolated case. It's some of the foods and some of the marketing schemes toward the keto community, unfortunately, the companies may very well be well-intentioned, but the products are not helpful to some people's health.
It's a good cautionary tale. I don't like those things. I know many people who've had similar experiences, and or they have stalls. Yeah, there's all kind of problems with them. I think my crowd, and I love it. I've always been just like, let's just stick to the whole foods. There's so many delicious whole foods out there that you can make yourself, and just skip the stuff. You can't really cheat nature. That's also one of my things. We always try to cheat nature around food. You can cheat nature. I always say this. Yes. I mean, yeah, we can fly an airplane. That's cheating nature. But when it's talking about food and like real stuff like sleep, exercise, and food, you can't cheat nature. You can't just take a pill that makes you sleep 8 hours without actually sleeping 8 hours. It doesn't work like that. So just give up on the stupid keto treats. Just, if you want something, make something from scratch, use some honey and enjoy it. And if you are a schizophrenic patient, then don't use honey. And you're not fortunate enough to do that, but most people can. And I see way more success with people sticking to the whole foods versions of things and not trying to just get into these weird keto alcohol, sugar alcohols, and all those, allulose, or who knows, there's a million of them. So, one more thing on the topic of when patients go off, we actually got kind of connected with each other from a lady who has a son, and she's really interested in helping her son because he has a bipolar condition that she tried everything. She was telling me the stories. She's like, we went to every doctor, did every medication. It was crazy, just terrible bipolar, debilitating bipolar. And then she found keto. I don't remember how, maybe and just completely resolved the symptoms. Everything was great. The minute the son went off keto, it's all back. So do you know much about this case?
I
Or
do.
just maybe you could talk about other bipolar cases as well.
So I'll talk. I'm not going to go into details on that case because I don't necessarily have permission to, but I will speak broadly about that kind of paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
So and the really good news is that we actually have 100 years of clinical data to inform what I'm going to say, and that is
Mm-hmm.
through epilepsy. So for those of you who don't know, we use epilepsy treatments routinely in psychiatry, and in particular for the treatment of bipolar disorder. So a lot of anti-epileptic medications are used, and they're actually approved by the FDA for the treatment of bipolar disorder. And what we know from the epilepsy literature is this, that when people have uncontrolled seizures and they start a ketogenic diet, they need to be 100% adherent to the diet for at least a year or two. If they go off the diet, there is a very high likelihood their seizures will come back pretty quickly with a vengeance. So that means ketogenic diet could stop someone's seizures. If they've only been doing the diet for 2 months and they think, oh, I've been seizure free for 2 months now, I think I can go ahead and have pizza. If they go ahead and have pizza, good chance that they are going to be seizing within 1 or 2 days. And if not even sooner. So we have that data. However, in the epilepsy world, after people have been doing the diet for anywhere from 2 to 5 years, they're usually actually strongly encouraged to try to go off the diet because something is happening, and we have a lot of scientific studies kind of outlining a lot of the somethings that are happening,
Mm-hmm.
but they're very different. They range from hormonal changes, neurotransmitter changes, changes in metabolism broadly, changes in the gut microbiome, changes in inflammation. Like all of these things are happening, but these things become more permanent and fixed after 2 to 5 years. And so the way I think about it loosely is they are restoring their metabolism, or they are developing metabolic resilience or flexibility. And a lot of people with epilepsy are able to stop the strict ketogenic diet, go back to some other diet, and remain seizure free. That the benefits persist. So it's not a lifelong kind of treatment. It's a treatment that you do for a few years, and And for a lot of people, they're able to stop the treatment and do something else. Not everybody is. There are definitely epilepsy patients who have been on the diet for over 40 years. Every time they stop the diet, their seizures come right back. So they have to stay on the diet. So I don't want anybody to take away from this like there's a one size fits all kind of recipe or paradigm, because there's not. Everybody's different. But as a rule of thumb, people can do the diet and then go off. And I'm finding almost the identical thing in mental health patients, that that patients can do the diet if it really works for their psychiatric symptoms. In the first year, if they cheat on the diet, their symptoms will almost certainly come back with a vengeance within hours or days. But if they can do the diet successfully for 2 to 5 years, somewhere in there, some patients are able to kind of transition off and do something less strict. I don't personally know anybody who's used the ketogenic diet for a mental health condition who can go completely back to their old diet and remain well. That, if that person exists in the world, or people like that exist in the world, I don't know about them. And
Well,
that
no one
would
should
be,
probably go back to that diet. That's just an unhealthy standard American diet.
yeah. Well, and yeah. And I think I would say the same thing for somebody with diabetes, for instance, or obesity. If you lose a lot of weight on the keto diet and then you want to transition off the keto diet, you can't go back to your old way of eating, because guess what? You're going to gain all your weight back. Um, but you can transition to something different, as you were describing. Maybe more whole foods. Maybe you can add fruit in. Maybe you can add honey in. Maybe you can add potatoes in. Something. But in the mental health patients, I think it's going to be a similar story, that you do the diet for a discrete period of time that allows your body to heal, and then you can transition to something less strict. And the nice thing is you can always come back to it if needed. So if something happens in life, even if it's not related to diet, if something happens in life, if somebody gets extremely stressed and their sleep gets messed up, that can push them over the edge and can cause them to have a manic episode or depression or psychotic symptoms. And even if the trigger for those symptoms is sleep deprivation, which on the surface should have nothing to do with diet, you might still be able to use a dietary intervention like the ketogenic diet to get those symptoms under control again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to reiterate again the huge difference when you add foods back in and you're adding healthier versions of those foods. And like I said, no one should just go back and eat a standard American diet and just eat packaged foods and fast food. That's never going to work no matter what. But there's such a huge difference. And I think that this could account for the variability in results from certain people, because some people, they can go off and then they get really bad. Some people can, quote, go off and do okay. We need to look at what they're going off on. If you're like, yeah, I went home and I ate just a bunch of cake and Pop-Tarts, then of course. But if you went, oh yeah, well, I went off, but I ate, made myself some fruit and yogurt, then yeah, that's a huge difference. And that's what I found personally. And there's a huge difference. It's not like carbs are just the enemy. It's like, yes, if I am once in a great while, I'm in an airport and I get some burger or something, I'm not going to feel good after. And maybe, yes, I can have some joint pain or allergies come back because I ate that bun on the burger. If I eat a potato or fruit or honey, nothing at all. It's only benefits. Like I might say I even sleep better, or, just do better in general. Very, very big difference. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I agree.
So I want to get more into just looking at diet and lifestyle. You start bringing up sleep as a paradigm. Like I interviewed Dr. Thomas Seyfried about cancer as a metabolic disease. We talked a bit about Alzheimer's being, in not all cases. I interviewed Dale Bredesen about this, being a metabolic disease, type 3 diabetes, insulin resistance of the brain. It sounds like you're putting together with other people as well, that mental health is somewhat of a metabolic disease. It's either a metabolic disease or something to do with the gut microbiome or both. How do you look at it?
So the big picture is I do see mental disorders as metabolic disorders of the brain. And the gut microbiome is part of metabolism. If people don't get that they are inseparable. It's kind of like, it's the same thing. Um, and But there's a lot more to metabolism than just the gut microbiome. So in order to really understand what that means, though, metabolism is actually a lot more than diet, and most people don't understand that. Most people think metabolism is about burning calories, and its only influence is diet. It's what you eat, and I actually take a much, much broader view than that. And unfortunately, that makes the story extraordinarily more complicated and complex, because metabolism is influenced by things like sleep, like hormones. Which ones? All of them. It's influenced by temperature. It's influenced by light. It's influenced by all sorts of things. And
Exercise.
um, and so in order to really understand metabolic disorders, you have to understand all those things. And that's one of the biggest shortfalls that I see in the metabolic health field. Honestly, I do. Is that far too many diet gurus will say, do my diet and you'll be fine. Cut out carbs and you'll be fine. Cut out fat and you'll be fine. Cut out animal sourced foods and you'll be fine. Cut out whatever food, cut out the, certain types of plant-based foods, you'll be fine. You have all these diet gurus making these absolute claims as though metabolism is that simple. And unfortunately, metabolism is not that simple. And that's why their advice does not work for 100% of the people that they prescribe their advice to. And if anybody thinks that their advice is 100% effective, I welcome your study to the medical literature. I have lots of patients to send you, and I want to see 100% results, because nobody gets 100% results. And so in order to understand, well, why doesn't anybody get 100% results, you have to understand the complexity of all of it. So that means you could put somebody on a low carb diet, and if they're getting horrible sleep, there's a chance it may not work, because they're not getting sleep. And sleep is stressful. Sleep increases your cortisol levels. Cortisol increases your insulin resistance, irrespective of whatever you're eating.
Lack of sleep.
Cortisol in and of itself makes you insulin resistant. And so there's more to insulin resistance than just what you put in your mouth. It involves stress and sleep and all sorts of other things. And we have to put it all together in order to really understand it all.
So important. I always make sure I say diet and lifestyle. When I say anything, it's diet and lifestyle, right? You got to think about the lifestyle, got to include that. So sleep, lack of sleep is a stressor. There's a lot of studies on this. And even you can just look at shift workers, people who work the night shift. I mean, part of that could be circadian rhythm as well, but they have way more diabetes and insulin problems, right? So sleep is a huge one. This is well studied, super easy. Maybe we could go one by one in the lifestyle factors, and you could talk a little more about how they affect the metabolism and mental health. Like exercise would be the next one, I'd say.
Exercise is huge. Everybody knows exercise is great for metabolism and metabolic disorders. And we have an abundance of evidence that people who exercise regularly are less likely to develop all of the metabolic disorders. So they're less likely to become obese, less likely to develop diabetes or cardiovascular disease. They're also about 50% less likely to develop a mental disorder or have mental symptoms. And that's from a large study of over 1 million people in the United States. However, exercise as a sole treatment for your metabolic disorder is often not enough. So if you want to lose weight, telling somebody to exercise their excess weight off is futile. It is futile.
Absolutely.
If they're going to keep eating the same stuff they're eating and try to burn off those calories, we have numbers of studies now telling us that doesn't work. And in the mental health field, it's similar that exercise for mental health conditions, you can find people who have cured their mental illness, even chronic mental illnesses, through exercise. Those people exist, and I've talked to many of them. But it doesn't work universally for everybody. And so again, it's important to think about a complicated process and a lot of different factors.
Well, there is. Like, I think exercise, it's so valuable, and a lot of people have been talking about this for mental health, and it's like for depression. If you just get out there and do something, movement, it's so much value. But I was thinking is what else it could be other than, I mean, multitude of value, of benefits from doing exercise. One of them could be getting down, basically burning up your glycogen stores, and like, just like I was saying, you can eat carbs in a healthy way. If you eat the carbs and you exercise, you don't get this big glucose spike. I'm just wondering if someone who needs to be on a ketogenic diet, or that exercise, or they're managing something, some sort of disorder, that exercise would just help. One of the ways it would help is by mitigating the blood sugar response to food they eat.
That is one of the ways it helps. It actually helps in a lot of other ways too, but that is unequivocal. So exercise over time improves insulin resistance, decreases insulin resistance, makes you more metabolically flexible, makes you better able to manage whatever diet you're eating. But again, it's all interconnected. And that's where it gets complicated. Exercise changes your gut microbiome. Exercise changes levels of inflammation in your body. Exercise results in very specific hormones being secreted, sometimes from your fat cells, sometimes from your brain, sometimes from other organs. And those hormones end up having a whole cascade of effects. One of the things that I'll just point out is, so one of the logical questions, and for a lot of people, is, so why doesn't exercise work for everyone then? If exercise is so great and it does all those things I just said, it should be a one size fits all treatment. Everybody should exercise and everybody should get better. And what we know with certainty is everybody doesn't get better. Again, with weight loss, you're not going to lose weight by only exercising. And with mental disorders, same deal. You're not going to completely prevent all cases of Alzheimer's disease by having people exercise. So why not? So one of the tricky things, actually, there was a really useful study just published in a high impact journal called Cell in the last 6 months. And they basically looked at a group of people who had varying levels of insulin resistance. And what they found is that the people who were not insulin resistant had all of these beneficial effects from exercise. They measured all this lab work before and after an exercise session, just one exercise session. People who were insulin sensitive got all of these beneficial effects. The people who were the most insulin resistant got none of the effects. And actually, in some cases, the effects were quote unquote harmful. And so what that tells us is that, again, it comes back to this overarching theme. Everybody is different. It doesn't mean that people with insulin resistance shouldn't exercise. I think they should. But what it means is that you should not overpromise the benefits of exercise to those people. Instead, you should kind of let them know you're in a really difficult position right now because you might actually feel worse after exercising compared to healthier people who will feel better. It's kind of like the story I told of fiber. For some people, fiber, for most people, I think it's safe to say, for most people, fiber is a really beneficial thing for our metabolic health. And yet, for some people, fiber increases inflammation. Even though in all the healthy people, it's decreasing inflammation. And exercise seems to be a similar thing. That doesn't mean that people shouldn't eat fiber or shouldn't exercise, but maybe they need a period of time where they're not doing those things while they're trying to restore their metabolic health in other ways, so that when they do finally do those things, they can reap the benefits that everybody else is getting.
Well, I think it's, there's too much going their body. If we're talking about inflammation, if we look at it simply, I know it's very complicated, but being type 2 diabetic or having insulin problems is a big state of inflammation. And then if you're also trying to exercise, that's another source of inflammation. And so basically, and also to throw this in, you're talking about we need to change the diet. That's the big intervention. We can't just rely on exercise. So what's going on with these people, probably in that study, is they need to get back into an insulin sensitive mode and before they start exercising, and that's going to require a big dietary change. You can't just eat the inflammatory foods. There's so many foods in the modern diet that are just so bad that they'll basically outweigh your exercise is what we're kind of saying. Is so you need to change your diet first. Yes, I don't think if you're very overweight you need to just start exercising right away. It's like, let's get your diet in control, then we can start exercising. And then once you get into an insulin sensitive state, then it will be very beneficial and it'll help you manage your insulin and your glucose and all the benefits. So you got to get down to that healthy metabolic state first.
I agree. And I would even say in some cases, if the person's willing, like if you have a really overweight, obese person who's hardcore type 2 diabetic, if they are willing to exercise, I would tell them to exercise. But I would share the information that I just shared with all of you in that study. I would share that directly with that person. I would say, and here's the deal. In the short run, exercise might actually make you feel worse, and I want you to keep doing it anyway. I would share that with them because if you tell them exercise is good for you, it's going to make you feel so great. I feel great after I exercise. You'll feel great too. If that's the message you send them, and then they have the exact opposite experience, they're not going to believe you. Or they're going to think that they are defective, that they have a defective body, unlike you, and that whatever advice you have to offer doesn't apply to them because they didn't have the same experience. So I think it's really important that when we're giving advice to other people, it's really important that we try our best to understand the science so that we can give people real information and give people realistic expectations. And so the realistic expectation is, I want you to exercise, and I'm thinking that 2 months from now, your level of insulin resistance is going to be lower. That's our initial goal. And if that person says, but I feel so tired, I feel worse after exercising, I'm going to work with that person and I'm going to say, do you think you can keep doing it anyway? If you really don't, then let's back off. And like you said, focus 100% on diet, or focus on diet and sleep, or diet and stress reduction, or, all sorts of other things. But let's focus on other interventions to try to improve your metabolism first, and then we'll come back to the exercise later. But if the person, if you can let the person know, I hear you, and there's like even a study showing that, yeah, you probably do feel worse. You're not crazy. You're not lazy. You're not defective. That this is what's happening in your body, and we know it from a scientific perspective. And yet we also know if you keep doing this over time, it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I love it. So we've talked about schizophrenia and bipolar, pretty serious conditions. you talked about depression a bit. With our remaining time, I'd love to go back to depression a little bit because it's more common. Well, we even talk about alcoholism too, which is not super common, but maybe people just want to drink less alcohol, or maybe people just have light depression, or they just don't feel as good. I want to talk more about that and how the dietary changes and what people can do just on a more average person level, or I guess maybe just in depressive symptoms or like clinical depression.
So yeah, depression is a huge topic, and again, it comes back to kind of complexity and what might be causing it. But just to share, for those of you who don't know, depression is now the leading cause of disability in the United States and in the world. So it is a very common problem. And with the pandemic over the last 2 years, the rates of depression and anxiety have skyrocketed. At I don't know what the latest statistics are. I just haven't checked, but the CDC has been actually tracking this data in the United States. And earlier in 2021, the rates were about 50% of the United States population was estimated to have symptoms of depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, PTSD, or suicidal thoughts. And at one point in the pandemic last year in 2020, 10% of everybody surveyed, a representative sample, 10% of the United States representative sample of the population, 10% said they had seriously considered killing themselves in the last 30 days.
Wow.
25% of 18 to 24-year-olds said they had seriously considered killing themselves. 1 in 4 18 to 25-year-olds. So those rates are staggering. And so I guess the reason I share that with you is depression is common. It is really common right now, especially with the pandemic. And I guess I want to come back to the bigger picture of the complexity. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone. So if you lost your job, and if you and your spouse couldn't tolerate being alone, cooped up, social isolation, and you got divorced, I know some people like that. So they lost their job and they lost their spouse. Telling them to go on a diet to fix their depression is going to sound really clueless and really out of touch with reality to them. And I would not tell them to go on a diet to fix their depression. So helping that person fix, let's say it's a man, helping that man fix his depression, you need to focus on the obvious, which is, okay, you just lost your whole life. Like you just lost your spouse and your job. You need a life. You've got to create a life. You have to at least have hope that you can get a life. And if this guy is kind of obsessing and ruminating about how he just messed up his entire life, it's over, there's no chance for redemption, he can't see any hope for any kind of a decent future, asking him to change his diet probably is not going to be the answer to help him. However, there's a high likelihood that man's diet has changed as a result of his depression. There's a very high likelihood he's eating a lot of junk food now. And that is resulting in higher levels of inflammation. That's resulting in changes in his gut microbiome. It's resulting in sleep problems. Now he can't sleep. What is he thinking about when he can't sleep? He's thinking about how he messed up his whole life, how his wife left him, how he lost his job, how he's a big fat loser, how he has no reason to live. And he can get lost and trapped in that cycle. So now he's eating junk food, he's not sleeping, he's, hopeless. So for that person, he needs a comprehensive treatment. And if he is eating a lot of junk food, or if he was already obese to begin with, if he already had diabetes, if he already had pre-diabetes, a dietary intervention could be part of his treatment. And the shocking thing is that a dietary intervention could actually allow him to figure out a new life, even though he would say, I know why I'm depressed. I'm depressed because I lost my job and I lost my wife. A dietary intervention could still play a role, but you can't come at him with change your diet and that'll fix everything, because that's out of touch.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And I mean, there's different kinds of depression in general. I know there's just different camps of like, or not just camps, but just how it even develops are different kinds. So we can't say that they're all the same. But I think we're kind of saying, well, it's a great option and it probably can help. And it's probably a good thing to try.
It is. I think for people, I would say this. I would say that if you are suffering from even low-grade symptoms of depression or worse, think about what your diet is. And if you are eating a lot of comfort foods, and you might think, well, I'm eating those comfort foods because I'm depressed. I just don't give a shit anymore. Like I don't care about my life. I don't care about my health. I don't care about my weight. What's the point? It doesn't matter. Like these other things are why I'm depressed. Even if that's happening, I would say, depression can take on a life of its own. And even though one thing can start it, if you start kind of getting trapped in this vicious cycle of overeating junk food and then not sleeping well, that is, again, causing all sorts of changes in your body and brain. It's causing inflammation, gut microbiome changes, neurotransmitter changes, hormone changes, all sorts of things that then keep you depressed, or they make your depression even worse. And sometimes part of the solution, not the entire solution, but part of the solution can be, I'm going to stop eating the junk food. I'm going to do some kind of a quote unquote healthier diet. What that step should be is, again, highly controversial, even in our space, even in our low carb keto community. Some people will be like, he should go on carnivore. Others will be like, he should go on, vegetarian keto. He should go on whole foods paleo. He should go. And I don't think there's a one size fits all solution even there. But I think eliminating some of the obvious junk food, and trying to include more whole foods, natural foods could be a really good first step. That may not be enough for everybody, but for some people, it might be enough.
Exactly. Why not? I mean, this is what I'm trying to say here on this podcast every time. There's no downside from what I've seen, only benefits. I've had people close to me fix a lot of their mood problems, depressions, a lot of stuff with dietary changes. It's amazing. It's powerful. Thanks for all your research you've done. Do you have anything you're working on in the future? Any kind of exciting things you're working on? What are you interested in exploring next? Or I know you're
That's
already in the midst of it.
so I am. No, and thanks for asking. So the most exciting thing I've got coming out is that I have a book that I'm working on that relates to a lot of what I've just talked about. But it goes into so much more detail. And it's about the connection between what we call metabolism and what we call mental health or mental illness. And I'm actually working with a lot of people on this. I'm working with a lot of researchers. There are several philanthropists, and there are some pretty big organizations like the Charlie Foundation and others that are really interested in a paradigm shift for brain health. And so we're hoping to use this kind of opportunity to see if we can really get a paradigm shift. And a paradigm shift is no small feat. I am the first to know that. And I'm fully prepared for this to go nowhere. But I just want to put a shout out to anybody listening that we are going to need people. We are going to need people to help. And the first step is just going to be to spread the word, to learn about a very dramatically new way to think about what we call mental health or mental illness, to understand it through this lens of metabolism, and to understand the ramifications of this opens up so many new treatment paradigms that most people don't take seriously today. And these are treatments that I believe can completely transform people's lives. And I guess what I can say is, my entire career, I have looked so many patients in the eye. I have looked so many family members in the eye. I've given them every one of the best treatments that we have to offer. We've tried dozens of pills. We've tried shock treatment. We've tried psychotherapy. We've tried hospitalizations, and they still have their mental illness. And I've had to look them in the eye and just say, no one knows what causes mental illness. This is the best we have to offer. I know how frustrating and sad and disheartening it is that you're not getting better. I wish somebody knew a better way. And in about a year from now, a whole coalition of people, are going to be offering a better way. And we are going to need your help to actually create change.
That is outstanding. That's what we're doing here. We're building a team, a coalition, just a tribe of people who are after the same goal. I'm so glad you're doing this. I actually didn't even know exactly what you're doing. I wasn't leading you. I just had a feeling you're doing something. So that's really awesome. I'd love to promote the book and the project when it comes out. And yeah, I think my small part in this is making the Food Lies film to get out there to the world, go to the mainstream audience, get on Netflix, get it worldwide, to let people know that diet and lifestyle should be the first look. The first, it doesn't have to be the only intervention. Obviously, we talked about this a lot. This should be the first thing we look at, though. Let's take a look at it for all kinds of conditions, whether it's Alzheimer's, cancer, easy ones, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and now we're saying mental health as well. Very important to look at all of these things as metabolic problems. Thank you for your work. Thank you for coming on today. You can find Dr. Chris at chrispalmermd.com. Anything else?
No, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
All right, guys. I'll see you later. Thank you, Dr. Palmer.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for listening, for sharing with a friend or family, going back and starting back at episode 1, giving this podcast a review on iTunes or the podcast app. Please check out nosethetail.org. Support the amazing ranchers that grow the regenerative meat and get it to you. We do that. We get it straight to you. nosethetail.org. That's it. Check out the Sapien podcast while we take a little break here at Peak Human. Check out the Food Lies YouTube channel for some content there. And we'll see you in the new year.